myself out.
I am afraid of...
I'm terrified and paralyzed by...
I am deathly afraid of...
Welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast with your host, me, Ryan Perrio. Hello and welcome to the Sum of All Fears podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Perrio. This week, my guest is comedian and speaker Jonathan Jones, a.k.a. JJ Jones. Jonathan Jones is kind of a renaissance man by his own accounts. He does speaking, commercial real estate investment, comedy, and in the past he was a professional wrestler. In this episode, we talk about his life as far as wrestling, fatherhood, comedy, speaking, and then we get into his fear of making a bad impression. So let's get into that interview right now with Jonathan Jones. All right, my guest is commercial real estate agent, as well as speaker on the multi-generational workplace and comedian. Jonathan JJ Jones is here with me today.
Howdy.
Also, probably the biggest fan of my podcast. He may be the only person that listens. I am not sure, but he's a comedian here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he's probably one of the best dressed comedians in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He will come in, rock the bow tie and the suit occasionally when he is in between doing his day job or speaking or doing comedy. He was Mr. Thickness, I think, 2 years in a row in the Dallas comedy scene. JJ, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm glad you remembered Mr. Thickness. I use that as my only credit. There hasn't been another competition, so I technically am undefeated.
If they have another one, if you get it again, do you get to be Dr. Thickness? At some point, does it graduate into a PhD in thickness?
Oh yeah, I definitely have increased my thickness since then. So I think that's fair for me to lobby for.
To just work up the titles to Dean Thickness.
Yeah, Master of Thickness, Emperor of Thickness. One of those things.
So what got you into stand-up? We'll start with where I know you best, stand-up.
Well, man, I like most love stories. I got divorced, and I was looking for something to fill my void. And I'd always wanted to do stand-up, always been interested in it, but I had no idea that Dallas had a scene. Like my assumption was you got to go to LA, you got to go to New York, you got to, to go find comedy. And I didn't know it was here. Well, when I was looking for something to do, a buddy of mine who's a promoter was putting on a one-man show for, what's his name? The Honky Tonk Man, Wayne Ferris, the Honky Tonk Man, former WWE superstar and Hall of Famer. And he was doing a one-man show, and this guy had done the one-man show in other regions, but wanted to do one down here in the area, and found that a comedian was a better opener for his show than a band. And so the promoter called me, and he was like, hey, he asked about you because you used to make everybody laugh in the locker room when you were when I was a pro wrestler. Would you be interested in opening for him on this thing? And I thought to myself, sure. And he was like, good, maybe like 20 minutes or so. You talk and do your skit, because everybody calls it a skit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then do it. And I was like, great. And then me, being the nerd that I am, started looking into it, and I go, oh man, 20 minutes is a lot. I don't know that I'm going to do this. I probably should go get some practice. And fortunately for me, it was about 8 to 10 months out before I was actually going to do this little 5-day tour. But that's what kicked me in the butt and made me start hitting mics and writing and taking classes and everything I could to build some material.
So I want to back up for just a second. Did you
Sure.
say pro wrestler? That you were a pro...
Yeah. Yes, I am. I'm a Renaissance man. I was a pro wrestler. I got into, I was like most of the kids that were teenagers in the 90s. I was a huge fan of D-Generation X and Stone Cold and all that stuff. But even growing up, I was a huge wrestling fan. And I was a father young. I was a father right out of high school. And I got into a little trouble and lost half of my scholarship, which was athletic. I was going to go to SMU and I lost half my scholarship because of disciplinary issues, and needed an outlet for my athleticism and energy. And I just so happened to be watching Monday Night Raw one night, and on cable, and a public access commercial came on, and it was Skandar Akbar wanting me to, or not wanting me, but had a wrestling school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me sign up. And so I did it. And that was the next 5 years of my life.
So you said athletic scholarship. What sport were you a scholarship athlete in?
Football. I had offers in track for USC and football also for a smaller college. But because I was going to be a dad, I thought I needed to stay local. In retrospect, I probably would have taken a different one. I had a theater scholarship to go to Northwestern. But at the time, I knew so little about education, and I'm the first person to graduate college in my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew so little about education that I thought if I went to college on a theater scholarship, I had to be in theater. Like, I didn't realize I was just paying for school, and it didn't matter what I majored in. But I had no one to show me the way. So I passed that up, and in retrospect, that probably would have been the best fit for me. But yeah, it was football, man. Believe it or not, I was a quarterback. I was pretty fast back then.
Okay. I'm trying to picture it, but
yeah, and I wasn't even like Dante Culpepper big. I was just felt like 228. I ran a 4.40. Yeah. Well, I didn't have, my arm was okay. Mm-hmm. If I ever was good enough to make the league, I would have been a backup at best. I was a good leader of men, not necessarily Drew Brees' arm.
Yeah. What would your 40 be now?
Forever.
I didn't know if we could challenge Tyson. Tyson's always wanted to challenge people to a foot race. And,
if I stretched out, I'd be willing to do it. I'd probably surprise some people. I mean, I got a lot of momentum, so I used to. I'm not as fast as I used to, but I'd race them.
If you got a good long finish line that you can ease up.
Yeah, my big race in track was the quarter mile. I ran a 400. My best split was 46 seconds. I used to be pretty quick, man, but I hated track, so there's that.
And that's kind of, I think, a lot of sometimes student athletes is sometimes you realize that it's not really you that's behind that. It's people that see your talent and pushing you, and sometimes that push can just be aware because it's not something you're inspired to do. It's something that you feel you have to do.
Yeah.
So let's count down the things that we've just learned about J.J. Jones in the last 10 minutes. That he was a college recruit for football and track at many, I guess, major universities, and had a child. Really, I knew you were a dad, so that's separate. Is she an athlete in any way?
She was. My oldest is 23 now. She's wrapping up college, and she was an athlete in high school. My youngest should be an athlete. She's like 5'11" and 13 years old, but she has dedicated her life to music and theater, but she's exceptional at it. My athlete dad heart breaks because I'm like, you could get a scholarship by standing there. But my proud dad heart is exploding because she really is a talented actress.
Yeah, it's also neat to see them find something that they're willing to just consume for hours on end, probably just to find, because That's what I tell any young person is like, find your passion early, because that way you can spend more time on it rather than trying to find ways to do it when you're older.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, we're around the same age. And I think the generation that we grew up in, that wasn't there was every once in a while, there was someone like, hey, find something you love to do and you never work a day in your life. But that really wasn't how we were pushed. Like, we were pushed to like fit inside of a box, not necessarily do what you love.
Yeah.
Which is, unfortunate, but it is what it is.
But it's also leading into the other achievement that you've done. You're a keynote speaker, and you've won awards for your articles in the multi-generational workplace, which I'm curious to see how you were inspired to write that piece.
Well, I was at a point in my career where, well, let me back up a little bit. I was trying to finish up school.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 master's degrees, and I was finishing up my second one, my MBA, and I took a class, and it was online, and I failed it. It's the only time I've ever failed a class in school. The teacher hated me. Everything that I did, she thought I was just trying to like get by, not do the book work. I was just creative in the way I was thinking about things. And she didn't like that I wasn't following the book to a T. And so she failed me, which was upsetting because 1, college is expensive. And 2, like, it was the last thing I had to do. I was done with school forever, right? So the next semester, I was like, maybe if I was in person, I could have a better rapport with the teacher, and they wouldn't think I was just some jackwagon. They could understand where I was coming from because, we were face to face, and they got a feeling for me and all that kind of stuff. Well, the next professor was much different. He was willing to teach out the book, but his thing was like, look, the only thing I want you to do in this class is write a peer-reviewed paper. It's your only grade. I want it to be about something that matters to you in business. And it's a pass-fail. Like, that's it. And there's other work and stuff, but he's like, that was it. So at the time I was working, and I was getting frustrated in my career because I wasn't moving up. And it wasn't because I wasn't skilled enough or as good as people that were at my level or better. It really felt like there was nowhere to go. Like, the walls were kind of closing in. So I started looking at generational diversity. At the time, it was just people not retiring, right? As being a business problem. And that's what inspired the paper. Is I was like, my life sucks because modern medicine's making people live longer and no one's retiring, so I can't move up. And it boiled down to, when I was a kid, life expectancy was 72. Well, shit, it's about 82 now. So saving for the last 7 years of your life and retiring at 65 is a lot easier than saving for the last 17 years of your life.
Yeah.
And retiring at 65. So people are staying in the workforce longer. And so I started doing research on the different generations and the impact on the workforce and how that goes. And I wrote this paper about it. Some of the research was done by me, some of it was done by other people. And I put this together, and it was at a time where not a lot of people were talking about it. It was still kind of taboo to discuss age. And my professor sent it off to some of his colleagues. And they were just like, hey, look what my grad students are doing. And one of them, she was at Cambridge in the UK. She was like, are you sure this is a doctoral student? And he was like, no, I'm positive it's not a doctoral student. Like, we want him to come speak at the Cambridge Business and Economics Conference. And so they told me about it. And I was like, okay, great, I'll go do it. And while I was, fundraising to go do that, I got contacted by the journal, International Journal of Arts and Sciences, and they wanted me to be a keynote at Harvard for the same deal. And my approach and thought about generational diversity in the workplace was really to break apart the generations and view them more in the perspective of a culture than like an age bracket, right? Because people are more accepting when they're like, oh, that's something they do culturally, or like, he, does that because of his culture. She acts that way because of her culture. Then all of a sudden people are more accepting, or at least more willing to listen to why things might be different. And there's some good solutions in solving some of the problems. And that's where it came from, man. It was me being like, this sucks. Why does it suck? So kind of like coming up with a joke, right?
But that's how, it's like writing. It's basically you were able to get to the emotional, I guess you were tapping into an emotion that I would say a lot of people were probably feeling, because they're seeing not as many opportunities open up because people in those positions weren't retiring. And so you were kind of in the dead end job. And it's weird to be working for a company now because it feels like they're doing everything in their possibility to keep you moving through the company. Like I struggle with it because I was just like, when I started, it was like, just put your head down, do your work, and don't get noticed. Now it's how can you get noticed? Like everything is about getting recognized and noticed and prestige and moving into new positions. In other places, it was, if you do your job, you keep it, and that was the whole long and short of it. And it's such a weird thing to try to change to, from being just straight production to be somebody that I will outwork you, and to have to sit here and to volunteer for things and to be a chair on this or be a point of contact for that is such a different swing for me as a corporate person.
Yeah, it's a lot different environment than it was. And it's weird because I feel like the rules have changed mid-game for me. And I'm not upset about it. It's just, it's very different than what I grew up accustomed to, or that I've been accustomed to in my 20-year career.
It's the longest I've ever spent at a career. Like, I've been with this company now as a contractor and an employee for 13 years. And I've been almost an employee, almost 10. Like, it'll be 10 next August.
Shit, man.
And so it's one of those things where I enjoy what I do. I'm good at it, but it's also like, now they're pushing me, like, say, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I've never put that in. You just never put that thought into it because it's never been, it's never been such a wide open, I would say, advancement. Like, your advancement was a straight line. You did this job, you're the lead of this job, you're the manager of this job, you're the director of this job. Now you can do this job. Now you can cut over here to this department and be a team lead on this job. And it's just so, I would say it's so much more wild, wild west. Like, it's just, you can, just retain your services and talent. As a younger person, it's what carrot can we offer you to stay here? And as a person like me, I'm like, well, your steady paycheck is carrot enough for me. And it's just definitely messing with my, I guess, ability to just be content. And because I'm content in doing what I do and getting a, nice little raise every year and then doing comedy on the side. But it's like, now they're like, well, what other positions do you want? Let's try to get you moved up in the company. And like, I don't know, it just is confusing to me. It just like, it's overwhelming to think that, what used to considered, a lifer or a, dedicated employee is now a red flag.
Yeah. Why do you want to just come in, clock out, and do your job every day?
Yeah.
Like, why don't you want more than that?
And it's like, I don't know what more there is, because it's just one of those things where I've always been, I'm not a college graduate. I don't have any kind of degrees of any kind. I'm just one of these people that put their head down. In school, I put my head down so much, I didn't know about SATs. I never took my SATs or anything because I just did the day-to-day work and didn't want to be there the rest. And so I was like, I would come in for school because I was supposed to be at school, and then I would go home. I was very routine-based, and any kind of deviation just throws me for a loop. But that's just me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, dude, that's yeah. I'm not a creature of change either. Like I like I like things to stay the same.
And since you're a creature of change, like it's interesting your fear, which is go ahead and tell people what you're afraid of.
So I have a fear of giving people the wrong impression. Like I don't like when, whether it's the way I articulate things or facial expressions or my reaction to things, give people the wrong impression of how I truly feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been that way for a very long time. And I've thought about where it came from. And the only thing I can think of is that when I was young, a lot of people really didn't know what to make of me.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not they knew how to articulate that to me properly or not. You know, I'm biracial.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, and I grew up, I was born in 1980. I'm 41 years old. And I was born only 13 years after the Loving Act. And a lot of people don't know what that is, but the Loving Act was in 1967. And there was, it was finally legal in this country for a person of color and a white person to be married and have kids now. So there were mulattoes, biracial, whatever you want to call them before that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was taboo and technically illegal. But I was, my brother was born in 1970, so it was 3 years after it was legal. And I was just 13 years after. So when I grew up, it was very uncommon for mixed race people to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And people didn't know what to think of me or take of me, which is the era that I grew up in. And now it's very commonplace, and I'm happy for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of left me in a place where I think that sometimes in an effort to be non-offensive or non-descript to individuals, it ends up being worse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I'm scared of that. I'm scared of portraying that in interpersonal communication. I'm bad at that in relationships, at work, and everywhere you can imagine. I got an example of how I give people the wrong impression.
So you're constantly walking on eggshells just because you feel that your life is something you have to explain, and you have to do it in a, very descriptive and eloquent, wording. Like you want to make sure that everything, like you don't want to give them the impression that, and it's got to be hard because there's heritages on both sides there, and you kind of potentially deny one to try to make a good impression to the one that's more predominant. So like if you're in a room more of African American people, you may accentuate the black half of your
Oh yeah.
Whereas when you're in a room full of white people, you may point to try to be more Caucasian and white, do behaviors and things like that. And
well, yeah, I mean, I learned at a very early age to code switch. So, and basically code switching is just, kind of mirroring the speech patterns and mannerisms of the people you're around. It makes them more comfortable with you. And it's just something I did naturally, I guess, survival technique more than like manipulation. And now it's funny because I'll catch myself doing it, or someone who's known me for a very long time will see me doing it, and it's foreign to them. They're like, holy shit, you talk with a country twang? And I was like, oh, I'm around country people. I do, I guess, and also with social media and how visible everything is, to your point, fitting in or accentuating or denying, like it's all backwards and flipped around. Like it's,
yeah.
I get people often think that I'm just, an awful person because of my value set, but they don't really know who I am. Like I love everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I just have like some values that I hold pretty near and dear. And, because I don't subscribe to, whatever the majority subscribes to, a lot of times I give people the wrong impression,
mm-hmm.
Which isn't what I'm trying to do at all. And like I said, I hate it. It's the fear that I have most is is talking to people seeing me, observing me, and getting the wrong impression, because I'm not a bad dude, not a hateful person, not trying to be someone I'm not.
So do you have an example of giving somebody the wrong impression? Like what would be a situation where you've kind of walked away, I guess, shaking your head that happened?
Well, I mean, I've been recently been told that I wasn't Black.
Okay.
And that was because I wanted to understand everything surrounding the horrifying murder of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
So my initial reaction was, like everyone's, that was awful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, what happened? But also the way my mind works is not to defend the officer, but like, let me see the whole picture.
Yeah.
What else was going on? And while those things were happening, the world was in turmoil, dude. We're all locked in. This is where, the fears kind of reemerged, is the world was in turmoil. We're all locked down. Everybody's terrified of the virus. The country's on fire. We have a president who's a jackwagon. Like, all this shit's going on. It's terrible. And then, like, one after another, the next thing you know, I'm being told that I'm not Black because my assumption is that police kill every Black person. Well, I've been around it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I've always obeyed the rules, and I've been pulled over. I've gone to jail. Like but I've never felt like my life was threatened because of a police officer. So that's one thing. Another thing, like when it comes to like women, for example, like I'm a traditionalist in a lot of ways, but I'm also very much a feminist. Like, I have daughters. I want women to be able to do everything and make decisions and like be amazing in every right. But because I have some traditional values, like, I can be perceived as a bigot or a misogynist or these kind of things, and it's not me at all. And those are the types of things that I'm talking about. Is it's very easy because I don't get incredibly emotional in situations. It seems like I don't care.
Yeah.
You could probably relate to that.
Yeah. I definitely get that a lot. Like, that's something my mom would say to me whenever I made bad grades, and that kind of stuck with me because it wasn't that, but I just couldn't put a pin feather or anything on what was happening. And medicine has gotten to the point where now I would have known where I'm at, and it would have, there could have been things that have made it easier, but there were just things that in the 80s your parents just wouldn't do, and that put your kid on meds was not feasible. And
oh yeah,
it was just
same here, man.
Now it's commonplace. And it seems there are things there's not everybody that's a perfect child, and just because they may not have a abnormality physically doesn't mean they don't emotionally, mentally, or there's some things that just don't, not all things develop. And so you will get people that maybe are on the spectrum somewhere, or emotionally just irrational, or just people that are like statues, basically, that some people there's fight or flight, but there's also freeze, and a lot of people in a stress situation will just freeze and shut down.
Yep.
And so it's something I struggle with, and I totally get where you're coming from as far as there is outrage in some of these things, like with the George Floyd and everything else. There is outrage. As somebody that's been bullied their whole life, I have an intimate knowledge of fear. And so I can say in those situations when you get pulled over, there is a lot of fear. And if you're radiating fear to the police officer, then now he is now on guard. And it's just, unfortunately, it's a human nature thing that I, wish there was more oversight in that, because there are just reactions to everything. And unfortunately, some people are more victims of that than others. And it seems like some people's fear is okay, and they try, oh, well, he's because he's Caucasian, he's afraid, he's just nervous of me. Let me just put his mind at ease. When it's a person of color or minority that's nervous, oh, there's probably drugs in the car. I just feel that there are different, I would say different, I guess, answers to the same question based on what the officer sees. And that just bugs me, because I think as we get more and more to what like mixed race, and, it's okay that it's not such a socially taboo thing to love somebody of a different gender, race, or color, or ethnicity, or religion.
Anything.
You're going to get more of these mixed potential issues. And I think hopefully as we become more integrated, a lot of this goes away, because there's not such a stark contrast, and there's not all this generational, the older generations influencing by having their own stereotypes.
Correct.
I've taken a lot of diversity classes, and it's really fascinating to find, it's just all these preconceived this bias that people have always had, and you don't realize anything you have. It could be as innocent as someone of a Latino background at your office saying, "Oh, I'm guessing you'll bring tacos," or some, and it's not something super, offensive, but at the same time, you're putting tacos on somebody that maybe it doesn't have to be. Just bring a dish. Don't assume.
Yeah.
Don't make an assumption on what dish they could or should bring based on their ethnicity, or culture.
Yeah, I think that where we're at with all the instinctive biases, I think that plays right into my fear, right? Like, because when I'm incongruent with what people's assumptions should be or think they should be, or where, like, that's where a lot of problems come in. And to your point, asking a Hispanic person, about bringing tacos, well, they're not a monolith, and there's a lot of Latin American, branches that tacos aren't even customary in their food, right? Like, that's not why. I'm Chilean, dude. I bring ceviche, or whatever, like it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, like, you don't want to make assumptions that are unfair to people, or bring those biases even from an innocent place. But on the other hand, like, you don't want to paint everybody as a monolith and have no flavor in life in the world.
But it's just, I think it's just getting past those, I guess, and just actually getting to know the person, and actually opening yourself up to a conversation with that person, while at the same time, not opening to the point where you can be taken advantage of.
Yeah. That's a scary thing too, right?
Because kindness can be taken advantage of at some point. And so you have to try, to mask that or work with that to not be taken advantage of.
Yeah. People take kindness for weakness a lot. And it'll oftentimes get taken advantage of, because a lot of times kind people are patient people as well.
Yeah. And that's something, in comedy that you'll realize, is that being a lenient person, that sometimes people will take advantage of that. And so it's just basically a constant work in progress. But I mean, we are progressing. I think society is a ways better than when I was a kid. And, some of the things that were socially taboo aren't as. It's sad that still some of the things still exist. Like, to the George Floyd point, that was still a problem in Spike Lee movies in the early 90s, like Do the Right Thing. That was still happening, and it's sad that that's still, because that really kind of changed my life as a kid, because I grew up in Houston and the suburbs and stuff, and I didn't understand that there are dangers out there for non white people, that there are these struggles, and it's easy to be perceived as a threat, and that your life could be on the line with every police stop. And it was such a, far, I guess, outside of my scope of what I thought society was like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. And I'm like, whoa, so you're saying that my friends of color could be inadvertently shot or something just because they made an action in a car that was perceived as a threat.
Yeah, and it's a terrifying thing. I think, like I hate the attitude of everybody be on guard and mad about it. At the same time, I hate the attitude of let's sweep it on the rug and ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean, my father had a great talk with me, and I still to this day say my privilege in life is that my dad was around. And thank God he still is, but he was like, look, son, you're 12 and 6 feet tall. You look like a grown man. You can't you can't present yourself as aggressive and terrifying and angry because someone who doesn't know you that's looking at you from 50 feet away is going to be like, oh, there's a grown man over there, not a kid.
Yeah.
Now that I'm older, I look around and, I take my kid to school and I see these boys that are giant humans. And I'm like, oh, I get exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Because if I saw this person 50 feet away, I'd be like, who is that man walking up to the school?
It's just little things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and it's just, hopefully, like I said, things are getting better. It's just, unfortunately, it takes time to kind of to move to that new norm, because so many people will drag their feet on the old way and how it used to be, and they only do that because it benefited them. It was their time to shine. And my life, when people are saying, like with the old, I guess, president, make things great again, I was like, well, when you say that, there were generations that, didn't think that was so great, like
Yeah.
as a Caucasian male. Oh yeah, I'm sure it was a great to have every opportunity, every, advancement opportunity despite your educational background. But there are minorities and first generation immigrants now that have kids that are naturalized citizens of whatever the immigration's descent. And now it's those little inside, what you call jokes are no longer jokes, because those kids saw the people you were making fun of come home and what it actually did to them. Even though they laughed at you for saying it, they just didn't want to. They didn't want to cause a scene. That was the generation of just do your job.
Just do your job.
It wasn't it. What you didn't want to be the person that brought something up, or risk, I guess, losing everything to make a statement.
Yeah, to stand up for tacos, right? Like,
yeah. People would just smile and laugh and, oh, you're funny, but it still affected them a little bit, and they obviously brought it home with them to the point that their children, noticed it, and then when they became adults, said, hey, maybe, we don't put that on me just because of my, my heritage or my color, my skin, or anything like that. There's more to me than that. And I appreciate it if you'd actually just make an effort to know me versus where I come from.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. And I think that happens more now. Like, I think to your point, it's way better than it was. And I see it continuing to get better. I can see it, in our little community, and I can see it with the people that I talk to and meet. I also see with kids, like stuff that I even still to this day may chuckle at because of, we thought it was funny as kids. Like, my daughter would be appalled at. At the same time, there's things that have been completely forgotten. For example, she the other day, I don't want to get her in trouble or get her canceled, but she said something was Oriental.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I was like, I don't think you're allowed to say that. Like, I think you got to be careful about it.
Yeah. They don't want to be, I
And
guess, grouped into one, I guess, civilization.
but it was interesting because like she was not trying to be offensive at all. And it wasn't even about a group of people. It was about something specific. And I hate that I don't remember, but like she had no idea that that was a problem because I guess kids don't say that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. So what do you say? And she goes, well, we call them Asian. And I go, that's great. I go, so what are they? And she was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, Asia's a big country. You know what I mean? Like Russia's in Asia.
It's a continent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, continent. Sorry. You got Russia or USSR or whatever it's called now.
Sri Lankan.
India, Sri Lankan. I mean, it's gargantuan, right? And so that's all to me, you know, this is something that I feel like I would be misunderstood, right? Is where I go, okay, well, what do you mean by Asian? Because I'm wanting some qualifier. Not that it really matters, but I'm interested. Like, because you call someone Asian, are they someone from India or are they someone from China? I don't know, and that's what I mean. That's another example. Like that's a question I would ask, and someone would just assume I'm being an asshole about it. But I'm genuinely asking because if I wanted to qualify somebody or refer to somebody and not be offensive, but be able to describe somebody with more detail besides just Asian, you know, how would I do that? And I'm not trying to solve it now, but I was just using it as an example of like, I don't like that feeling where someone's like, man, JJ's an asshole. He's trying to make fun of the whole thing. And I'm like, no, I'm just curious.
Yeah. But you just have to be authentic and just that. What I've realized is just you have to be authentic, and you know, as a comic, impressions matter. So it doesn't help your fear any when you're a stand-up comic because when you go into a new club or there's a new booker in town or anything like that, you want to try to bring your best impression, and it's very anxiety ridden because it depends on a crowd that may or may not like you, and you go up there and you could literally just have death because the audience isn't there for you, or they're here just because they don't know what's going on, or they just may have been turned off by your first joke and just absolutely shut down. But there's just so much, I would say, anxiety when it comes to booking.
I bet.
Because it's again, for impressions matter, and that's why I tell people like I can't watch you every week as a booker myself. I was like, I can't watch you every week. That's like watching something dry, it's like watching a wet piece of paper dry. It's not going to be something that you can see drastically. Like I want to look at you over time so I can see a drastic change rather than just the microcosm of the next week.
Oh yeah, he changed that one word.
Yeah. Well, it's not even that. It's most of it is presence, and you're not going to get over stage fright or stumbling in one open mic session. It doesn't. Nobody's that quick. And if you are, then I'm wondering about your material. Because it's hard to find the right words sometimes. Sometimes you have to do it like 50 times to find the right word to make the laugh happen. Otherwise, they're thinking too hard. And so I try to watch people, and then I'll pop in like every so often, listen to them and just take a grade on where they at versus like the last few months when I heard them, and just I try to do it that way rather than watch every single set, because I don't think I can. It doesn't help you if I don't see the change. Whereas if I walk in after 3 months of not hearing you and hear the difference, I'm like, okay, that is definitely
some growth.
Yeah, and that's how I try to approach it. And it's just hard. Addison Improv still gives me jitters sometimes because it's one of those things where I want to be on the regular roster so badly that I'll get anxiety trying to make this room explode, and it'll have opposite effect, because that desire to make that first impression, I'll press so hard that the audience can sense that and they press back. And so then I will have a mediocre to bad set because I am either rushing and cutting, trying to get, to more punchlines faster so I can have more, what I would consider a hotter 10 minutes than if I had just done a regular 10 minutes. Like I'm trying to put 15 minutes of material, clip it to where it into a amazing 10. But some of those little details are just things over time, and then I have to try to piecemeal my words so that I don't go into the other parts that I cut. And so I have to stop and think, okay, where am I going from this? Like I can edit, but when you don't practice it and you just try to throw it out there, your edits, your habit is to keep going with the way you've always done it.
Yeah. No, that's funny that you say it. I see that in myself too, especially when you're trying to give the right impression, and then you end up getting your head or nerves, man. You're not relaxed, so you're not really yourself. Like, no, I'm actually funny. It's not.
Yeah.
This isn't me.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, oh my God, what it used to be for me is like, this is my opportunity to show them that I'm good. And then as things would unravel, I'd be like, oh my God, this isn't, I'm not, it's not good working. I don't know what to do. This is all going so badly. And it just unravels you. It unravels you at your core. And even though you're able to stand up there and still talk, in your mind, you've already just throwing up your hands.
Yeah, it's a crazy, man. I it's funny. I guess I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, but like, comedy is not conducive to my worst fear. It's like, it's literally the worst, because we're always trying to make a joke, and some of us are better than others. Some of us have no filter, like, and especially when we're talking to each other, like. Yeah. The kind of stuff that we'll say to each other to make each other laugh is way different than what some of us will even try on stage, right? Like, it's just like a different thing. And so it's funny. I hadn't really thought about that. I wonder if it's my way of fighting back against my fear a little bit too, Yeah.
It's also something, again, that it can over time, comedy can give you awesome keynote and speaking skills just to be able to control. If you can learn how to control your emotions, you can rule over public speaking, because that's a lot of the key to comedy, is being able to control that anxiety and that fear and that desire to put 7 minutes of comedy into 5 minutes, and to be okay with doing maybe instead of 7 minutes, doing 4 minutes and getting good response and getting off, rather than trying to shoehorn in an extra 2 minutes of material because you want to see what it does. And that's
even want more, man.
Well, it's just really hard, because your anxiety is this is my chance to do this. They're really liking me. Let me try to get these in here. And what you do is you end up either giving them a shortened down, edited version, or you start to pick up the pace of your speech to the point that they're not able to follow, because you're going through it so quickly that they're already on to the next thing before they can actually respond to it. And you just end up getting the wrong read on some bits. And so that's why I have my discipline of, even though my new jokes right now that I'm doing are probably from 2015 or 2016, that I'm just going through those old notebooks systematically every month, page by page, and putting the next things on my list and just working through them for that month, just because I want to give them their honest, and I want to try to, work them and see what can do what has legs, what doesn't, but I don't want to just play with the new toy I wrote 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, you're really, really disciplined about that. I've noticed that since I've been doing it. You'll commit to, this is the 5, 3, 7, whatever minutes I'm doing this month, and you'll work that muscle out. And I've learned from that, like, to do the same thing and record it and try to, what is this going right? Did I say it the right way? Let me say it the same way again to see if I get the same shitty response. Okay, I did. It's an art form, but man, it takes a discipline, and it's something crazy.
Well, I appreciate you for doing this, JJ. It's been an amazing conversation. Where can people find you on social media if they want?
I'm the Boostaloo on Twitter, Boostaloo on Instagram and Facebook. I got a website coming out soon, but it's not out yet. So if you follow me or you tag on, I'll make a big announcement when that comes out. But I appreciate your time, man. I appreciate you having me.
Tom, what is Boostaloo, by the way? I want to know where that comes from.
So it's a nickname my dad gave me when I was younger. All my friends used to thought it was funny, and I used to get teased about it a little bit, but I just embraced it. Called me Boost, and I made it my gamer tag, and I was kind of leaned into it. I don't know where he came up with it or why. I didn't steal a toilet. I don't know what Boostaloo. How do you break it down? But it's phonetically just like it sounds, and I've just leaned into it.
So is your dad English, like traditional?
No, he's actually one of 7. Well, yeah, the Lou. That's the only thing I can think of a Lou is, right? But he's one of 7. He grew up in Conway Projects in Stockton, California, in a little duplex, and
awesome.
He's just a normal, hardworking black guy.
Well, I wonder. Yeah, you might ask him, or is he passed on?
No, he's here. He'll be here for Thanksgiving, so I'm gonna hang out with him. I'll make sure I ask him.
Yeah, just ask him what inspired him to call you Boostaloo, because I feel like what he's gonna say is you may have danced as a kid and you were like doing like the Boogaloo Shrimp, like breaking 2, and maybe that's where he got it from, was like the Boostaloo.
Maybe, and who knows? Maybe.
Or you wore tracksuits. Maybe you wore tracksuits and stuff like that as a kid, like Mikey B and all Todd.
No, they used to put me in bow ties and sport coats, actually.
So you had bow ties even as a child.
Yeah. I don't want to wear the white man's noose, bro.
Okay. Well, you only have to half wear it.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you again, JJ.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thanks, Ryan.
So that was Jonathan. What an interesting conversation. Kind of deep, too. It's amazing sometimes how people can be impressions, both positive and negative, not just by what they see, but what they hear from you. Sometimes if you don't get full behind a certain thought or certain opinion, how it can sometimes tend to come back and be a negative. It's a real interesting proposition. You can check Jonathan Jones out at Boostaloo on all social media for the most part. Check out his comedy as well as some of his papers. They're a fascinating read. As for me, I am off to the Plano House of Comedy on Wednesday. And then Thursday, I will be on my way to Wichita, Kansas to work with Vince Morris. And then the following week, I work with Vince Morris again at the Looney Bin in Oklahoma City. So come check us out. If you're in either of those market areas, we'll be performing all weekend at both clubs. After that, I'll be recording my album featuring for Rob Little at Hyenas in Fort Worth. So that's going to be a fun show. Come check that out one of those nights. It'll be a fantastic night of comedy. I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm practicing, and we'll see how well things go. As for that, New Year's has come and gone. Happy 2022 to everyone out there. Hopefully it's a more exciting year for me comedy-wise. I'll try to get into some more clubs as the year progresses. Hopefully, we'll get more exposure and things will pick up. I'll have some new guests. I have one booked for Tuesday that I'll interview, and we'll see how it all works out. I'm excited. I'm going to hopefully get a bunch of interviews for 2022 for this podcast and just keep them going. I thank you guys again for listening to the Sum of All Fears podcast. If you like what you hear, leave a review. I love to see 5-star reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you have feedback for the show, email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. Things are winding down on the football front, so my job at Dave & Buster's will, I guess, come to an end. Maybe other stuff will come here and there on Sundays as the year goes on. Thanks again to everybody that's done that with me. That being said, happy 2022, and thanks for listening to the Sum of All Fears podcast. Have a wonderful week. And now some thank yous for the folks that make this show possible. Thanks to Barry Whitewater for my art and graphics. You can follow him on Instagram at bwhiteh2o. Get it? H2O like water. You can also follow him on Facebook, Music. A huge thank you to Gunnar Olsen for the wonderful music provided for this podcast. You can follow him on Instagram at gunbuns, that's GUNBUNS, as well as his website, gunnarolsen.net. Check out some of the samples that he has recorded. They're amazing. He's an amazing percussionist. If you want to follow the show, we've got a Facebook group, Sum of All Fears. Instagram, Twitter, you can find us at Some Fear Fans. If you have some feedback for the show, email me at somefearfans, SOMEFEARFANS @gmail.com. I'll be happy to take those into consideration. Also, if you'd like to be a guest, email me at somefearfans@gmail.com. We can try to iron out some details and get that settled in. Give us some feedback. If on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, leave a review. It makes the show bigger, and it's not going anywhere. I'm going to record as many shows as I possibly can. If you want to follow me on social media, I am at Ryan Perio. It's RyanPerrio on all social media platforms. You can follow me there, and you can check me out at ryanperio.com, my website. I'll try to list upcoming shows there as well. It's been kind of spotty because as soon as I set it up, that's when the pandemic happened, and everything's kind of just in a holding pattern. Thanks again for listening to the Sum of All Fears podcast. Next week, we'll have another guest with another fear. Thanks for listening.